Hello. So glad to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me. 5 days is a long time to be at. I don't know if any camp is cool enough for 5 days. I know it's hard if you are a part of this program. It's kind of hard to tell the people that run this that maybe 5 days, maybe it should be reduced to 4 or 3. But I'm just feeling like a 3 or 4 day camp might be a slight improvement over a 5 day camp. I don't know. I was just thinking, a 5 day camp that's a long time. But I joke, but the truth is the work that is done here, the lessons that you've learned are essential because the work is hard. And it's important for you to know, and I'm glad that you know, that when you go back home, when you go back to your college campus, that you're doing something that students are doing all over the country, that you're a part of a network, that you're part of a system. And I spoke to several members of the Goodman family, and I told them, I'm also really honored because I grew up just having a deep reverence of Andy Goodman and saw him just as a hero who came before me. I was a student leader at Morehouse College in Atlanta, and even though I was born almost just right after the Civil Rights Movement, I was in awe of the courage that it had to have taken to leave his home and come down to do the work that he was doing. And I think it's powerful. I feel two kind of ways about it. I think it's really powerful and inspirational that you all get to go back home and go back to your college campus and know that you are continuing his work. Like, that's special. And that's exactly what you're doing. There's also something painful about the reality that his work is still so necessary. Even as the students sang, I had the thought, like, I wish that song did not resonate so much today. Like, I think there was a part of me that imagined what freedom riders and other people imagined when they registered people to vote and confronted injustice. I can't imagine that they thought it would be as disturbing and problematic today as it is, and that voting rights would still be under attack in so many disturbing and problematic ways, and that injustice would still be so prevalent. And there was even a part of me just, maybe 10 or 12 years ago that thought I saw our country going in one direction that was particularly hopeful and encouraging. And I'm not so sure at all that we're going in that direction. Yet there's still reason to have hope. And so for the next few minutes, the doors are closed, and this is a special group of people who care so much about voting that you've taken 5 days out of your life to go to a voting camp. Like, that is so, like, that's, you love voting when you go to voting camp for 5 days, and you're committed. And so I'm going to say some hard things that I hope will give you some insight and some thoughts to chew on. But before I dig into that, I just want you to know I believe in you, and I mean that even more than my words can convey. I believe in you. I believe in what you're doing. I believe that what you're doing is so vital and so essential that I really hope you push it as hard as you possibly can. I know what it's like to be a student leader and get back to a place and sink into a shell, or maybe your peers around you don't quite see you in the light that maybe you see yourself today. But when you get back home and you get back to your campus, I'm really, really hoping that you just push it as hard as you possibly can to register as many people to vote, to get as many other people to volunteer and to participate in this program, because I really believe it's vital. I want to tell a couple personal stories for a few minutes and tell you some lessons that were really hard for me to learn. And it took a series of fumbles and mistakes and confrontations for me to learn the lessons. And yet I know that tends to be how lessons are learned, through failure and trial and mistake and desperation. And so I'm going to tell you the lessons, knowing very well that when someone tells you a deep lesson from a microphone, it's very hard to accept it. Lessons aren't always best learned from seats. But I'm going to share these lessons just with a hope and a prayer that you get some of it. In 2014, I was still Shaun King. I definitely was not at Shaun King. I have two teenage daughters, and I have 5 children, 2 teenage daughters and 3 younger children. And when people learn that out, they're surprised, because I think I'm 38, and so I have an 18-year-old daughter. I just started really, really young. And so I got married when I was in college, and I was at my 15-year-old daughter's high school, and there were a group of students there, and I heard some students whispering, "There's at Shaun King." And like they were saying "at" like it was that was a part of my name. And it was funny because we weren't online, we were right there in person. And so it was one of the first times that I started realizing that even when I am in person with someone, that they still see me as at Shaun King, like an online social media handle. And yet in 2014, I was actually doing something really, really different. I was working at an environmental charity in Southern California called Global Green. And it's an international charity, and they were doing some really amazing work. And I was the director of communications there. Now, in the 15 years prior to that, I had regularly fought against injustice around the country. I was student government president at Morehouse in 1999 when a young man who was just a few years older than me at the time, Amadou Diallo, was shot 41 times on the doorstep of his home. He and his family actually moved from Africa to the United States for him to go to college. Unarmed, nonviolent, broke no rules. And his murder in New York, in the Bronx, woke me up in a lot of ways to injustice. His death in a lot of ways was for me and my friends what Ferguson was to maybe many of you. 7 years after that, I protested and organized people around the shooting death of a young man named Sean Bell, who was shot 50 times on his wedding day. Again, unarmed, nonviolent, broke no laws, wouldn't even have been arrested. He committed no crime at all. Police said they thought they saw a gun in his car. They saw nothing of the sort. And I organized people around the horrible death of Trayvon Martin. But in 2014, that's not what I was doing full time. I was not a full-time journalist as I am now. I've written over 1,500 articles about injustice in America and around the world since 2014. But in that summer, I was doing something very different. And I got an email from a buddy of mine who knew me from college. And he knew me from college as Shaun the activist. And many people, particularly like your college friends on Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever, when you leave college, many people are always going to know you as who you are right now. And you kind of get frozen in time because you leave college and you go and you live your life, but people only kind of remember you for who you are right now. And my buddy sent me this email, and I had no idea, but it would end up being a pivotal moment in my life. It was a YouTube video, a link to a YouTube video. So much has changed in 4 years since 2014, like rapid. When we look back on this period of American history, it'll be documented for many rapid changes of technology and many disturbing developments along issues of injustice. So in 2014, we weren't even doing trending topics. We really were hardly doing hashtags. You couldn't even upload videos to Twitter at that time. And he sent me an email, and he described a middle-aged black man on a sidewalk in New York. And he said, Shaun, in the video, the guy is begging the police just to leave him alone, and he's telling the police he hasn't done anything wrong, he's not who they think he is. And he said all of a sudden an officer comes up behind the man and begins choking him, and then wrestles the man to the ground and continues to choke him. He said, Shaun, the guy yells out over and over and over again, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He said, Shaun, the guy dies on the sidewalk. I'm at my cubicle in my office in Southern California, not sure if I should even click on the link. I had organized around police brutality, but I had never seen something like that with my own eyes. I clicked on the link, and I saw the man that we later came to know as Eric Garner literally being choked to death, breathing his last breath on the sidewalk. And I can't explain what happened to me in that moment, but I was not just shook up by what I saw, I was so disturbed by it that I couldn't shake it off. I went home and told my wife. It was not on the, I went to several news websites, it was not on the news. And I told my wife, I was like, I have to do something about this. And I had a thought that at the time made a lot of sense to me. But in retrospect, it actually was very naive. My thought was, let me share this video on social media. And I literally found a way to, because the video was like 12 minutes long, I had to trim the video down. And I taught myself quickly that night how to edit and trim videos. There weren't apps for that yet. Like that's the thing, a lot of things have changed very quickly. And I think I like illegally downloaded a video editing software or something onto my computer. And my thought was, I'm gonna share this video, and somebody who can do something about this is gonna hold this officer responsible. I shared the video. Eventually, many people shared the video. Millions of people shared the video. It was shown and watched all around the world. And the general conclusion, this is in July of 2014, for the next 2 weeks was, someone is about to be arrested and charged with a crime, because this was a crime. It was certainly a violation of NYPD policy. I was so caught up in sharing not just the video, but the stories behind his life and his family's life, because I would click on mainstream news stories and I would see them talk about Eric Garner, but it had no color, no dimension, no nuance. It lacked heart. And so I just on my private Facebook page, I did not have a verified account or anything. On my private Facebook page, I began writing short stories about that injustice. And those short stories that I was writing just on my private Facebook page began being shared all over the world. Some of them literally millions and millions of times, quoted all over the world. And I literally quit my job at Global Green, not knowing what else I was going to do, to document and share these stories. Literally 2 days after I quit my job, I get a text message from a friend of mine in St. Louis who sends me a live stream link to what he said was a teenager who had just been killed, and who at that very moment in the video was laying on the ground, dead, with blood flowing down the street. And he said, Shaun, when you click on it, he said, man, the people are losing it. He said, I've never seen anything like it. And he described it to me as a neighborhood called Ferguson. It's actually a town, almost 30,000 people. And what I didn't know, and even what he didn't know, was that town was one of the most oppressed towns from its local police department in all of America. Literally in Ferguson, Missouri, in the previous 3 years, they issued 35,000 arrests and only had 31,000 citizens. They'd issued more arrest warrants than people. More arrest warrants in that period than any other town in all of America. What we didn't know was that Ferguson was a powder keg waiting to explode, and that the death of this teenage boy 2 weeks after he graduated high school ended up really being that. 2 days later, I got an email about a young man who was shot and killed by police in a Walmart in Ohio named John Crawford. Again, unarmed, nonviolent, beautiful, wonderful brother whose girlfriend just had a baby. In fact, the last picture of John Crawford, which you've probably seen, is of him holding the baby. And he was literally on the phone with her in the pet food section at the Walmart when he was shot and killed, having no idea that this was about to happen. And so millions of people all over the country and around the world began organizing around the issues of police brutality. Fumbling, trying our best, experimenting, doing what we knew how, and often mimicking what we thought our leaders from the civil rights movement would have done in that moment. And so we in the early days just mimicked what we had seen before until we could try to figure out strategies of our own. About 2 months later, we're still fighting around the clock for justice. I get an email that a 12-year-old boy named Tamir Rice had been shot and killed just a few blocks away from his mother's home in the local park. And we're fighting simultaneously for justice for Eric Garner and Mike Brown and John Crawford and Tamir Rice. And in those moments, I really, really believed we were going to get justice. It felt like it. I had never seen so many people give so much of their lives and energy, stop whatever they were doing, not just in Ferguson, but all over the country, in New York, in Ohio, on college campuses, everywhere around the world. And we began to get more and more organized, and literally this phrase, Black Lives Matter, which was actually, that phrase was coined 5 years ago today. That phrase was being said all over the world, on the floor of the United Nations, at international tribunals. It was said all over the place. And we felt like it's only a matter of time until we get justice. And I did something that I have come to regret, but it came from a good place, but it was naive and foolhardy, but I believed it when I said it. I came to know so many of those families. I came to know the family of Eric Garner, his daughter Erica, who passed away this past January, literally basically fighting her heart out for justice for her father, which she has still not received. I came to know Erica. I came to know Eric Garner's mother and wife and other children and grandchildren. I came to know the family of Tamir Rice. I came to know Mike Brown Sr. and the families. And I looked many of these families in the face, even closer than I am to you right now, at kitchen tables and gatherings, and said, listen, just hold on. We're going to get justice. Hang in there. Don't give up. We're going to get justice for your family. And it never occurred to me that I was exaggerating, that I was overpromising something that we couldn't deliver. I didn't think it. I believed it. I believed we were going to get justice. And that December of 2014, just 5 months after I first got this email from a friend of mine about Eric Garner, my whole world has changed. That December, case after case, we began learning there would be no justice for Eric Garner, no justice for Mike Brown or John Crawford or Tamir Rice. In fact, police that year, we didn't know it at the time, but police in 2014 had killed over 1,100 people. And not a single officer, not 5, 4, 2, or 1, 0 officers were held responsible. Statistically, mathematically, that's ridiculous. Of course, out of 1,100 cases, of course, 17 of them were criminal or wrong or negligent. But the system was set up such that 0.00% of the officers were held responsible. And we did not know that we were up against something that was almost impossible. So we kept fighting. A few months later, Freddie Gray literally had his spine severed in police custody in Baltimore. Beautiful young woman, powerful civil rights activist herself, Sandra Bland, was pulled over for a foolish an unnecessary traffic stop. She was literally pulled over because she looked in her rearview mirror and saw the police officer with his lights on coming at almost 60 miles an hour behind her. So she just pulled her car over, but did so without putting on her blinker. So he pulled her over. She dies in the jail 2 days later. No justice. No justice for Freddie Gray. I then saw, as most of you probably saw, Philando Castile shot and killed by police on Facebook Live. Surely somebody would be held responsible for that. Again, he broke no laws. The officer who shot and killed him said that when Philando drove past him at full speed, that he saw the contour of Philando's nose and believed it looked like the nose of a man in a video who had robbed a store previously. In other words, he made that up. Philando had literally memorized every name of every child in the cafeteria of the private school where he worked, had memorized every food allergy of every, I don't mean on paper, he had committed it to memory. He had worked his way up literally from cafeteria worker to manager and supervisor and was a beloved local figure in his school. Shot and killed, broke no laws. Alton Sterling shot and killed selling CDs in front of a local convenience store 2 days after Philando was killed. And no justice again and again and again and again. And I had to come to understand that fighting for justice was right, and we were right to march and we were right to protest, but that being right is often not good enough. That being right in and of itself does not necessarily mean you're going to achieve the thing you're fighting for. I would rather be right and lose than be wrong and win. But I would ultimately rather be right and win. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So I'll take being on the right side of justice. I'll take fighting for voting rights, fighting for the end of police brutality or mass incarceration. I'll take being on the right side of fighting against poverty in America. I would always rather be on the right side. But I would rather us be on the right side and have some victories. And many of us, I didn't understand it at the time, but we had an exaggerated sense of the power of being right. We thought our rightness was going to really open the doors for victory. And no matter how right we were, victory continued to be elusive. And so I began studying and tinkering and adjusting how I fought for change. And I want to share quickly the 4 things that I think you really need for change, particularly in this country. I think it works in most situations around the world, but these 4 things I know you need. And part of what has caused us sometimes to lose is often we will get 1 or 2 of these things and we think that we're about to win, not knowing that you could have any one of these 4 things and you are almost guaranteed not to win. 1 is definitely not enough. 2 is rarely enough. 3, and you start to really scratch the surface of some wins. You may even get some vital victories. If you get all four of these things that I'm about to tell you, if you get all four of them moving in the same direction at the same time, I think we'll actually begin to see a lot of the changes that we want to see. So I've taught 8-hour workshops on these next four things. So I'm going to tell them to you in like 8 minutes, okay? The first is you definitely need people, and they need to be energized. The first thing that you do need is energized people. And I think we specialize in that. I think energy comes in a lot of forms. Energy can be anger, it can be hope, it can be despair, it can be frustration, it can be pain, it can be grief. I think this is a room of energized people. I saw you cheer and clap when people just touched stuff on the stage. They didn't even do anything. I saw you several times. I said, that woman didn't even do anything. She just touched the mic and people cheered. Like I saw, this room is energized. Again, I'm sorry to harp, but anybody who comes to a voting camp for 5 days, you've got the energy, right? The energy is there. So I have had this conversation with the most famous, influential people in the world, with everyday people, with family members of victims of police brutality. And over again, what they say to me is, Shaun, I don't understand why we're not winning, because they look and they see the energized people, and it's like, how are we not winning? We seem to have the numbers and the energy. Well, you do need energized people. It is the foundation of change in America. You need it, but if you lose and lose and lose, you start to lose the people, and you definitely start to lose the energy. You need energized people. That's the first thing. But the second thing you need people, and they need to be organized. I want to linger there just for a second, because there is something, and I've been guilty of this myself, there's something about technology in 2018 that has convinced us that collecting email addresses is organizing. Collect your email addresses. Do that. Like some people, if you can get an email address and a cell phone number, they're like, we've got it. And I get that. I get it. Collect email addresses and phone numbers. But that is the most superficial form of organizing. And it's necessary. Get them, collect them, use them. I could unpack for days on what an organized group of people looks like, and I think you understand better than most. But here's one expression of what I think it means to be organized. An organized group of people often could be you understanding the skills of the people in the room and finding creative ways to leverage the actual gifts and skills and passions of people in ways that matter. That's more like organization. That's a more efficient form of organization, of actually knowing the people well enough that people are doing what they're good at, what they're skilled at, and they're leveraging their skills and energies in useful ways. But we have often leapfrogged past relationship. And what I understand is that in the civil rights movement, often they were generous strangers that were together, but they also had serious commitments and relationships to one another. So you need people, and they need to be energized, but you need people and they need to be organized. I want to say this, and I mean it in the most hopeful way, and I'll tell you what I mean. I think on many causes that we care about, we are being by corporations, by organizations, by lobbyists, by politicians. We are being out-organized, and often we are out-organized because we see ourselves, back to step one, with the numbers and the energy, and we think step one is enough. And sometimes they will sacrifice step one. They won't have the numbers, they won't have the energy, but they'll nail step two, they'll nail the organization. And many people who often mean us harm are out-organizing us. How do you fix that? That's step three. And this is where I have to be like completely frank, and I'll spend the most time there, and then we'll close out with step four, and then we'll have our panel, and we'll be able to take some questions as well. The third thing that you need, and as I travel the country, I have visited now almost 150 college campuses all over the country. I've traveled to 40 different states, not just to city. I mean, I've been in small towns. I've been all over rural America. I've seen most of this country at this point. And what I rarely see is step three. To get change, to make change, you need energized people and organized people. But the third thing you need is you need a sophisticated strategy that really matches the magnitude of the problem. And here's what I normally find. When I meet with local organizations, when I meet with college groups and college students, one of the first questions I ask them, and now I've even started asking them before I come to town to give them a chance to maybe even prepare it if they had not already, but that wasn't what I was doing at first. I would just say, hey, show me your plan to address injustice on your college campus or injustice here in the city. Like show me or talk to me about it. And rarely was there anything to show me, not even like a page on a website. But normally, when I would ask them, when I would see that there was actually no strategy, no deliberate strategic plan in place, I would say, hey, just talk to me about it. And here's what would happen. They would begin to talk to me about the problems, the very serious, significant, real problems that they were facing on the campus, or in the city, or in the town, or in the county, or in the state. And what I started understanding, and it was a consistent theme everywhere I went, was that people were confusing a highly skilled understanding of the problem with a plan. And that really, really understanding the problem definitely puts you in position to create a plan. But knowing the problem is not a plan. It's not. And let me say this with some compassion. One of the reasons people are really, really struggling to create a plan is we're often dealing with crisis after crisis after crisis, emergency after emergency after emergency. Or it may be fatal police incident or murder after murder after murder. And just as you begin to wrap your mind around one incident or one cause, something else horrible happens. And it is really, really difficult to create a strategic plan in 2018. Because it often feels, in this climate that we're in, it often feels like your house is on fire. And it is really difficult to create a plan when your house is on fire. Or I would compare it to trying to repair a car engine while the car is moving. You know it's broken, you know it needs to be repaired, but as the car keeps moving, it's almost impossible to stop, assess it, fix it, see what the problem is. It's impossible. And often when I travel and speak and probe and say, okay, what's the plan? People with all of their heart, what they repeat back to me is a profound understanding of the pain and the problem, which is essential, but but that's not a plan. I don't say that as a criticism. I understand when you are grieving, when you are in crisis, when you feel like you are under attack, it is enormously difficult to plan. But I need you to understand that people and forces that are working against us, particularly on voting, are strategizing and organizing in the most sophisticated and unethical ways. And while we're grieving and while we're in crisis, often they aren't. I have noticed a callous, unemotional face to tens of millions of Americans who seem not to be bothered by suffering at all. Be it of children forcefully separated from their parents, be it of victims of police brutality, not even bothered. I've seen prominent political figures and commentators mock families separated from their children, mock victims of police violence in unimaginable ways. They're unbothered. And while they're unbothered, they strategize and organize and plan, and guess what they do? And win. Over and over and over again. Here's the last thing. You need energized people. You need organized people. You need a sophisticated plan that matches the magnitude of the problem. It's not something you can write on the back of a napkin. It's more robust than that. A sophisticated plan that matches the magnitude of the problem. The last thing you do need is resources. You need money, resources, a budget of some kind. There's one group in this country that particularly gets this really well. Energized people, organized people, sophisticated plans, and a whole lot of money. It's the NRA. And the NRA is so shockingly, horribly effective that a gunman in Las Vegas kicked the window out of a hotel and then shot the rest of it out and shot 541 people, and pretty much nothing happened about it. 541 people? What are we talking about? But the fact that nothing was done about it wasn't because nothing can be done about it. Nothing was done about it in great part because there's an organization that is energized and organized with strategic plans and a whole lot of money. Last year, the NRA raised and spent almost $360 million, which if you look at the top 10 civil rights organizations combined, that's more than the top 10 civil rights organizations combined times 2. That's what we're dealing with. Here's why I'm hopeful. I'll conclude with this. I would be so desperate and despondent if I thought we had looked at our worst problems and gotten all 4 of those things at the same time. Energized people, highly, highly organized people. That we had a plan that was so brilliant. And let me say this, a plan is really only as effective as the ability for everyday people to repeat it back to you. So if your plan is only known by a few people, that's not gonna work. Everyday people have to repeat back to you, here's the plan. If I thought we had gotten energized people and organized people in a sophisticated plan that everyday people could relate to, and we had finally put some real money behind it, and we started throwing all 4 of those things at our worst problems, and nothing happened, I don't know what I would do with myself. But that's not what we've done. We have not thrown our best solutions at our worst problems. We haven't, and you know we haven't. We have not thrown our best leaders at our worst problems. We have not thrown our best work at our most challenging issues. We haven't. It's not our best. It's not. And I believe with all of my heart. And when I look at you, like my oldest daughter is 18 years old, going into college. She'll be a first-year student this year. The best solutions aren't going to come from me. They're going to come from you. You're going to dream them. You're going to build them. You are going to organize the people. You're going to match up and pair up the plans and the strategies and the resources with those things. And it's going to be you that throws all four of those things at our worst problems. And it's not going to be me, it's going to be you. I'm going to be clapping like you did just when people were on the stage and cheering you on and high-fiving you. It's going to be you that does it. Listen, I wondered for many, many years. I grew up in such awe, not just of Andy, but of so many leaders and martyrs of the civil rights movement. And I always wondered, and maybe you have wondered, who would I be if I was in that movement? Would I do what he did? Would I march? Would I protest? Would I sing? Would I hold hands? Would I leave the safety of my home and go to Mississippi? Would I have that courage? Would I be a radical, or who would I be? And I wondered for years and years and years. When I was a student at Morehouse, I wondered, as Dr. King went to Morehouse and his shadow looms large over the campus. And I wondered, would I have his bravery, his courage? But listen, I don't think you have to wonder. The truest indication of who you would have been in his day and age, the truest indication of who you would have been is who you are right now. And what I know is that we are in a room full of people who have dedicated a chunk of their life and energy and time to being so weird that you come to voting camp. Right? That's weird is good. Like, if Trump is normal, let's be weird, right? You know, it's like, if that's normal, let's be different. And thank you, so much for allowing me to illustrate some of what I am working through and thinking through. But I am so immensely proud of you. I hope to stay connected to all of you. I hope to take some selfies and stuff with you here in a few minutes. And but I'm very, very proud of you. I'm going to pass the mic over to the other moderators. But thank you so much for having me. God bless you.
Do you want to say, would you just